Good morning, everyone, and a very warm virtual welcome to the Mount. My name is Michelle Daly. I'm the Public Programs Director. Well, I am joining you this morning from my home. We're very excited to welcome Zach Abrams, who is at the Mount this morning. Thank you for joining us today for our first virtual bird walk. Zach is a teacher and naturalist for Mass Audubon's Berkshire Sanctuaries. We're grateful to Zach and his colleagues at Mass Audubon, particularly Dale Abrams, for helping us to reimagine this program and for sharing their incredible depth of birding knowledge with all of us. If you're not already members, we encourage you to become members of both Mass Audubon and the Mount. And membership helps allow us to keep having programs like this available. We hope that today's program informs and inspires your own exploration of our property, as well as exploration of other beautiful spots all across the Berkshires. Before we begin, I'd like to share just a little about the property. In 1901, Edith and Teddy Wharton purchased 113 acres of farmland. It is on this land that the Mount was built. Today, the Mount boasts about 50 acres of land for you to explore, including not just our formal gardens, but wooded trails, fields, and marshes. This land contains an array of native plants and is a rich nesting and feeding ground for a variety of birds. While state guidelines do not yet allow us to offer in-person guided bird walks, we hope to resume those at some point this summer. And we hope that the information shared today assists you in your exploration of the property. The grounds at the Mount are open to the public from dawn to dusk every day. And we just ask that while you're here that you practice safe social distancing and follow all of our safety guidelines, which you'll find posted as you enter the property as well as on our website. Throughout today's event, we encourage you to send your questions and I will ask them of Zach. He is a teacher and naturalist for the Berkshire Sanctuaries, like he said. Specifically there, he leads birding, hiking, tracking, and canoeing programs and enjoys teaching about nature from amphibians and birds to mushrooms and reptiles. He's passionate about ornithology, and enjoys sharing his love of birds with everyone around him. At this point, I'm just gonna let Zach take it away, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Zach, you're muted.
Always something, right? Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm really happy to be here at the Mount, even though it's not our normal bird walks. It's wonderful to be here and get to share a little bit about what's going on out here with you. So I'm going to just start off with a little bit about Mass Audubon. In case you don't know, in case you haven't been to one of our bird walks or programs before, we are a nature nonprofit working across the state of Massachusetts to protect over 38,000 acres. Across the state, we have 100 sanctuaries, 6 here in the Berkshires, but we are a membership organization just like the Mount, and so we are really appreciative of all of our members and that support us through the future. I'm here at the Mount because a couple of years ago, there was this beautiful partnership between the Mount and Mass Audubon that got started up, and it brought this idea of connecting the landscape, and you can kind of see behind me here, maybe way off into the distance, right? We were able to get a conservation restriction on part of this property and other parts of the property, the surrounding land, that help protect what's here because there are some magnificent natural resources here. So we're really proud about that membership and really happy that we can protect the land here. Now, this all came into vision because of a little walk around the grounds and hearing the amazing bird sounds. So I'm going to try to recreate that for you a little bit. I got here this morning and I started walking down the road and I was thinking, what's going on here? And even in, close to the first day of summer, right, the sounds are fantastic. There are birds breeding all over the place here. And that's what makes the Berkshire special is the amount of birds that live here for the summer and breed here and call it home. We have, as we start off, we have open forest coming down from the gatehouse, pretty spread wide apart trees, not a lot of understory, but higher up in the canopy, you start to hear a couple of different birds sing. We have both a mix of deciduous trees and coniferous trees, making a pretty cool mix of habitats that there's some specific birds that really like to hang out there. From the gatehouse, you have a choice. You can walk down the main road, which zigzags through the forest to get to the main house, or you can take the little side dirt path that goes through a thicker part of the forest coming out to the marsh just below here. If you choose that route, you might start to hear ovenbirds, and if we're lucky, we might even hear one today. Oh, here's something else cool. But the ovenbird breeds in a lot of different locations around the property here, and it's one of the more common birds of summer. I grew up learning this bird because it's like the sound of summer. Even in the hot 3 o'clock in the afternoon heat, you hear teacher, 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 teacher. Right? And that's the ovenbird. That's the song of the ovenbird singing. And it's just a small little warbler. And to connect you to it, that bird migrates all the way to Central and South America. I once even saw one in Costa Rica doing a funny little dance across the forest floor. So you can make your way down that path to the marsh and to the wetland. And if it's earlier in the season, you might hear wood ducks calling and maybe getting ready to nest. Way out there, there's lots of dead trees, and those dead trees actually produce the nesting cavities for wood ducks. Hole right in the tree where the wood ducks can fly in and nest. Then if we make our way back up towards where I'm standing now, just on the southern side of the southern, maybe the southeastern side of the building, right? The sounds start to change a little bit, and maybe you hear this one here. Very hard. Seat, 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 seat. One cool thing that's happening is the cedar waxwing, which you might notice kind of seems like it was gone for a while. They like to wander around a lot and find food in different places. But the cedar waxwings are coming here because they're a really late breeder. Unlike a lot of birds who start to make nests in maybe late May or early June, the cedar waxwing nests later in June or maybe even July. And there's actually just a pair of cedar waxwings right above my head here. So right around here, though, we can hear a couple of different things. If we're farther down towards the marsh, you might hear a yellow warbler. Sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet. Or right along the edge of the wood, you might hear an American redstart, which doesn't have very much of a mnemonic device. It's more like a right? And it changes its song up so much, it gets so confusing. And you might get the hang of it for the first month of summer, and then the second month, it starts singing a different song, and you get mixed up again. And that's one way I remember that bird, because it's always sounding a little different. It's never perfect. The American redstart's a really cool bird. Another neotropical migrant that comes all the way from Central and South America to breed here. I like to think about it as tropical birds just coming here for the breeding season. One other cool sound that we're going to listen for. Maybe you'll be able to hear it, maybe not. But it's a really special bird. When I walked down here this morning, I was thinking, what are all the birds here that I could talk about? And I didn't think of this one until I got right here to the spot, set up the tripod, got the camera all going, and I heard this beautiful, beautiful winter wren right behind me here. Now, the winter wren is another long-distance migrant species, and it comes up here, and it might nest right on the root structure of a fallen tree, right? And if you're ever looking for them, that's where to find them, on the tip upside that root structure of a tree that fell out of the ground. Now, some winter wrens you might find in the winter around here, but a lot of them do migrate. Here it is. They're singing now. So the winter wren, having a winter wren here is really, really awesome, because it kind of connects you to deep, darker forests that we might not have everywhere across the state. And so you can come right here, you can stand right next to the building and hear this winter wren. Just so you know, this bird is this big. It is not much bigger than a golf ball. It probably weighs, I want to guess, less than a golf ball. There it is. So cool. It's not very far away from me at all. This little section might be my favorite place to bird. So we're just off to the parking lot right behind the main building, and it gets a little lower, second tier of the parking lot, down by a little stream. It's a little wet in there, and that is probably my favorite place to bird, because in the fall, lots of warblers that move through here as they're eating insects in the trees, and sometimes they move through like that. Just a minute. They're here for just a minute, and then they're gone. I also like when we get to hear the winter wren. They're singing right here next to us. There it is. I can't not listen. The winter wren is such a cool bird. Yeah, this is one of my favorite spots. Lots of other stuff that you can hear right here, but I could go on and on and on about all the different birds there. Now, behind us here, we have some of the beautiful gardens, and you might be able to hear a couple birds that are making some noise. We have 3 different birds that spend a lot of time here. We have, right now, I'm hearing a lot of brown-headed cowbird that is a very high-pitched call, and then as it flies away, it has a little chatter. Very short little chatter. The brown-headed cowbird is a beautiful, sleek black bird with a dark brown head, and that dark brown head blends into the black on the body. And from a distance, you might not be able to tell that it's 2 colors, but as you get closer, you might be able to see those 2 colors, and it's really, really beautiful. I can see it there right on the chat. What a stunning bird. But they are back here. They're right back here. And interesting part about a cowbird is that they're actually what we call a brood parasite. So they will lay eggs in other birds' nests because they historically wouldn't have had time to keep up with the nest. What the brown-headed cowbirds did is they adapted to follow the bison herds across the country. So as the bison herds walk through the grasslands, they'd kick up all kinds of insects, and that's what the cowbirds eat. But they wouldn't have enough time to raise their young, so they'd lay their eggs in other birds' nests. Now, they're a native species, and this is their tactic for survival. But there is a conservation concern with that. With forests that are chopped up a lot, or little patches of forest, the birds in the interior could get that cowbird parasite, that young bird in another bird's nest in a place where you're supposed to have deep forest birds. And that's the importance of protecting a piece of land like this. Because behind me is a big tract of forest. On the edges here, you'll get cowbirds. This is where they're supposed to be. This is where they'll be a lot of times. But in there, you can hike all the way out to Laurel Lake. So there's a big tract of forest behind me, and that helps keep the succinctity of the forest a little bit. Now, we also have some European starlings nesting here, and although they also have some conservation concerns, they're a really fascinating bird to watch. In the fall and winter, they'll group up in huge numbers, maybe thousands, and they'll make this beautiful twisting, turning pattern through the sky. And they make some incredible noises. You might hear them nesting here on the building or down in some of the gardens. Do I hear one now? I almost think there's one down there now. Very cool. Now, also in here, right, this nice gap between the trees, is really helpful for a lot of birds. They can fly from tree to tree, finding food, and right here on the edge, you can hear some birds like the white-breasted nuthatch. It's one of a common feeder bird, but in the summer, they're really hard to find because they get pretty quiet. And just behind me, we can hear one now. Mimit, mimit, right? Kind of sounds like almost not quite like the road runner, but two little notes, mimit, mimit, mimit. There's one just back this way. Very cool. So as I was saying earlier, right, there's actually a trail here that you can connect all the way over to Laurel Lake and over to Edith Wharton Park, which is another preserved piece of property right on Laurel Lake. And the cool part about that is that it has bobolinks. Now the bobolinks are a really special bird. They're coming all the way from central South of America all the way up here to breed. And the bobolinks have a big conservation discussion because they breed in grassland and a lot of hay fields. And so it's a really important bird to keep an eye on because they're declining all across their range. And so protecting them where they're at now is really important. I see a photo now popping up on the screen. The bobolink is an absolutely beautiful bird, and they have a very strange but lovely call. It almost sounds like R2-D2. Kind of like R2-D2 getting pretty mad. But it's a really, really cool sound. And if you make your way over there to Edith Wharton Park, you might be able to hear him sing along with some other birds.
So we have a question
Yep.
from Judy, and she's asking, why do birds need nests?
Why do they need nests?
Yeah.
Is that correct? All right. That's a good question. So the strategy for a lot of birds is that they're using the nest to protect the eggs that they lay. Unlike mammals, right? They don't give live birth. They're going to give, lay eggs. And so those eggs need incubating and protecting for a longer period of time, right? For example, our great horned owl. That's a really common owl that we can hear in a lot of different places. There could even be one here. I think there's a plastic one on the roof. But the great horned owl lays its eggs in February. So that nest not only protects the eggs, but it helps to incubate as well.
Thank you.
Yep. So I think it's time I can take some other questions. I don't know. I might have talked for 45 minutes.
Only about 15, surprisingly. So this would be a great time for folks to add your questions. We've got lots of wonderful comments. And then I don't know that you know the answer to this, and I'm not sure that I do either, but Stacy was wondering if Edith Wharton was a bird watcher. And I know that she was a great enthusiast of being outdoors, but to my knowledge, she wasn't specifically a bird watcher. And I don't know how common that was in the early 1900s. So maybe, I don't know if you know that history.
I can speak a little bit about it. I don't know if Edith Wharton was or not. I've heard as well that she was a nature enthusiast. Bird watching certainly did pick up in the turn of the century. So one interesting thing that happened around that time is called the Christmas bird count, and it's actually a kind of a cool. It's a cool citizen science project now, but somewhere around that time, even a little bit earlier, there's a transition between kind of the understanding of conservation and nature. But what happened was there's this tradition of people on Christmas getting gifts of guns, and they go out and shoot birds. And then at some point, right, eventually, somewhere around the turn of the century, they said, why are we shooting them? Why don't we count them? So somewhere around that time, they made this transition from not just taking from the environment, but to observe it and to count it. And that's some of the early beginnings of bird watching in this country. And then now bird watching is, very different with, we have different devices that can help us ID birds. We have, text messages and emails that let people know when birds are coming up and where they're being seen. So, so I can't speak to that, but that's a little bit of a little bit of history of bird watching. So it was definitely happening at that time. Sure.
Thank you. So Elizabeth Chapman is asking if we're also hearing frogs.
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe not at the moment, but
You know what I am hearing that almost would sound like a frog? The fountain. The fountain. And it almost sounds like a green frog. And if you are hearing something in the background, feel free to ask too, because it's tough to tell what is actually going through the microphone.
And then Robin Yates asked or says that she's seen pileated woodpecker, and I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, in her yard, and asking how rare that is.
I don't know if I would say rare, but they're not the most common woodpecker for sure. So that's our big woodpecker. The pileated woodpecker is big, maybe not that big, but got a big beak, and they definitely like older forests a lot of times, and they like a lot of dead trees. They're eating insects even in the winter. That's why they're making holes in trees to find the insect larvae inside. So it's a really, really amazing bird to have in your yard. That's a treat. That's fantastic. Not common to have in your yard, but we're fortunate in the Berkshires to have a lot of really wonderful forests where they call home. So a little in between.
Yeah. And Nancy Gilbert asked, or just asked if you could talk more about the veery.
The veery, absolutely. So that's another bird which I don't think I talked about it earlier. But if
talk
you're
about the veery.
What was that?
Or talk about the veery, I suppose.
So just over here, from when you're coming down the parking lot and you decide to take that left turn through the forest towards the marsh, it's a great place to hear veeries, as well as right behind me here, right off the parking lot in the stream. So the veery is a thrush. That means it's related to robins and bluebirds. And the veery is a ground nesting bird as well. And it has blue eggs, just like a robin. But the veery has a really beautiful sound. I like to remember it as it says, veery, 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 veery. Very, 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 very ethereal and flute-like and trilly. And that bird is coming, some of them from southern Brazil. Amazing, amazing, amazing distances that they're traveling. So that's a long distance migrant. And then they're also, right, the cool thing about the veeries is they have that really recognizable song and then a veer call. Veer. So you might hear that more often. Veer. But that song, some of the new research is showing that they might not start singing until they're on their breeding territory for 5 days. So we might not hear them until 5 days after they already arrived. So that's so cool, right? And they're going to breed here, and then they're going to be on their way. And that little veer call is really cool because you can hear that at night in the fall as they migrate.
Thank you. Joanne Spalding asked if there are new species of birds in the area due to climate change.
Yeah, so I always tell people this is my plug. Climate research is really done on much like a larger time scale we're looking at. So I always say I'm not alive long enough to notice that. I've also moved up from the south, so from Pennsylvania. So I haven't witnessed it myself, but I do know there are some birds that are here that might not have been. The black vulture is a bird that's really been tracked for its movement north, and that's a bird that, from what I hear, 10 or 20 years ago would not have been seen in the Berkshires, or very, very small numbers. Birds like the cardinal, believe it or not, were less common a while ago as well. And then in the future, we're keeping an eye on birds like the black-capped chickadee, which is suspected to have, its strongholds here in the Berkshires, and the southern species of the Carolina chickadee possibly replacing it from the south. So that's a few examples of that, but it's really, it's tough to see it in just a short period of time. A couple other birds that, birders like to keep an eye on in the Berkshires are things like hooded warblers and Acadian flycatchers and cerulean warblers, and worm-eating warblers. These are 4 birds that were right on the edge of their range. They have breeding populations in New York and in Connecticut just below us, and they're being sighted more and more frequently in Berkshire County. So those are birds that we're kind of keeping an eye on to see whether they are making a true push north.
And these are, I think, 2 slightly related questions. So one is, do you have a recommendation for the best field guide to use to identify birds? And then also how to get started bird watching in the Berkshires.
All right. So, yeah, I will talk about both of those things. Field guides, that's one of my favorite discussions. I love to talk about it because it's all about preference and all about what you want to do with it. So I learned a lot of my birds on a Peterson guide, right? Fits in your pocket. Peterson Guide to Eastern Birds. Roger Torrey Peterson was one of the early bird field guide producers in North America. Not the earliest, but one of the early ones. And the Peterson Guide to Birds is still very regularly used, and it's a fantastic book. That's what I learned on, and I still can remember the pages of it. Sometime, early in my birding, I also won a Sibley Guide to Birds in a birding competition, and I fell in love with that book. I love Sibley's paintings. I love those plates in there. So I really also like the Sibley Guide as well. Both are smaller books. They can fit in your back pocket as long as you get the Eastern Guide. The whole North American guides are pretty big. So both of those are really great. But now the book I really, really like, and is helpful for a different reason. I 100% do not take it in the field with me because it's gigantic. But it's called the Crossley ID Guide, and it's big. And the Crossley ID Guide is really good for when you're out in the field and you're like, what was that? Did I see that bird correctly? And then you come back, and Crossley has, instead of 1 or 2 pictures of a bird per page, there might be 10, 15, or depending on the bird, like 30 photos of a bird. So you can see, it with its leg lifted up flying like this, or you can see underwing, above wing. And so that's why I really like that guide. So those are 3 field guides that I really like. If you're interested in app field guides, you have the Audubon app and Merlin, and also the Sibley app as well. So those are three field guide apps that are really helpful. And iBird Pro, I use that one pretty frequently. iBird Pro and both Audubon birds come with bird sounds for all the birds on there, and that's really helpful as well. So how to get started birding in the Berkshires? Well, you can always come on our programs, right? We all got started birding some way. So whenever we lead programs, right, we're happy to have people of any skill level. Our bird walks are not designed for, 100% experts. That's not what they're designed for. They're designed to have a nice walk outside and to enjoy the birds we're seeing and to help get people into birding. So that's one way, you join one of our bird walks when we finally get to have them. Here's another thing though, is there is a website. It's the world's largest natural history-based citizen science project. It's called eBird. When I got started birding, this is one thing that really got me excited about birding. So eBird is this huge, huge database. On there, you can keep track of all the birds you've seen. So you make lists of a bird. So you go out, you walk around, and you can make a list of all the birds that you saw while you were out there birding. And then you can go back to eBird and you can see, I've seen 100 species this month. I've seen 10 species this month. And it keeps track of that for you, right? It keeps that life list, right? That list of all the birds you've seen in your life. But eBird also helps you figure out where to go birding, right? You can go on eBird and you can say, well, all right, I'm traveling to Florida. And then you go and you can look through all the different places that people go birding in Florida. You can look at all the birds that are being seen. It will update, you can look at really, really up-to-date sightings of birds, anywhere in the world. It's a worldwide database with something like over 60 million different lists of birds that have been recorded. So that's one thing that really helped me. Really, bird watching, right? One thing that helps is binoculars. But if you don't have binoculars, right, or you have an older pair, the most important tool for birding, I will say this all the time, are your ears, right? I don't know if you've watched. I've been out here, and maybe I'm not walking around birding, but I've been keeping track of everything out here. I haven't picked up my binoculars. I always say that's like kind of like the last resort. You can do so much birding just by listening, birding by ear. And that's one of the best ways to find birds, because oftentimes they're way up in a tree or down in a bush or far away, and you might just hear a sound. Right? You might not be able to see them even with binoculars. So birding by ear is the most important tool for birding. So those are a couple tips that I have. I'm happy to answer other questions on it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that this conversation could go on, but I think we have time for just one last question. And I apologize to everyone's questions we didn't get to. So Linda Frawley asked, what makes the Mount special for bird watching among other Berkshire properties, including Mass Audubon sites?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what it is all of those things I talked about. You have such a beautiful variation in many ecosystems. We have a mixed forest farther towards the parking lot. That's a very nice mixed deciduous forest with lots of hemlocks. And there's some really cool birds like Blackburnian warblers that breed there, which I didn't even get to talk about. But so you have this mixed forest of open forest there, which flycatchers really like. And then as you make your way down this way, right, you have the open area of the garden and this beautiful wetland down here. And that wetland has had a lot of really cool birds. We get Virginia rails sometimes, and herons, and at least 2 different species of herons, and even ducks we can find down there. But then you can transition up back into the forest where you can find things like our winter wren or Louisiana water thrush or scarlet tanager. So you have this gorgeous this little mosaic of landscapes right here on the property. So you can see a lot of different birds from just a small area. And then you can go all the way out to Edith Wharton Park for bobolinks.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. I know this is not the same as getting to join us on a walk on the property, but I hope this provided some information and some inspiration for your future visits to us. And please, we are definitely working towards making sure that we can offer that again this summer. So as soon as we, feel confident that we can do that safely and within the guidelines that have been put out by the state, stay tuned for an announcement from us about the resumption of in-person bird walks. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Zach. Thank you to everybody at Mass Audubon who has partnered with us over the years in this program. And thank you to all of you for joining us and for your incredible questions. And again, apologies that we couldn't answer them all. I know we could have gone on, but unfortunately we have to let our grounds crew get back to work so they can keep our property looking so beautiful. So thank you again.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you as well to everybody. I'm so pleased to be here and be able to share this beautiful property with you, and take care. And if you have any questions, email me at zadams@massaudubon.org.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.